Hello, friends. This is the week that our course makes the transition from European social democracy to American democratic socialism. Um, what we get this week is a kind of introductory chapter to a work that will soon be published on the history of American democratic socialism that will steer through the entire history and famous figures and figures wrongly forgotten and theoretical debates. There's always in the middle of every chapter some sort of account about, meanwhile in theory, and it's both theory of the time that's going on and also theorizing about what it is we're reading. And religion is going to play a much more important role in this work than in any book ever written on this subject previously. It's one of my main arguments, has to do with just the role of religion within American democratic socialism. And so because this is an opening chapter of a work, there's just all manner of sort of table setting and definition of terms and discussions about who's in and who's out and how, what's going to drive the narrative. I'm especially concerned to say that that this book is written very much in the spirit of the Debsian maxim that there's no such thing as an unorganized socialist, which Debs knew was not true. Of course, there are plenty of people out there who don't belong to anything and who think of themselves as being democratic socialists or part of the social democratic tradition. But that array of individuals, whoever they may be, are never really the point. The point isn't to try to describe all the possible permutations and variations at the individual level. The point is to be driven by people who are in this struggle and are therefore joining major organizational vehicles that are struggling for it. And so the irony about Debs himself has to do with the fact that though Debs himself says there's no such thing as an unorganized socialist, he himself is a romantic individualist who cannot bear to go to Socialist Party conventions. He just cannot handle, has no tolerance for the kind of bickering and the way the caucuses line up and battle each other for position and so on, all of that stuff, politicking and the like that go on at conventions, Debs can't have anything to do with. And so he is, as a figure, is on both sides of this question about whether we're really just talking about varieties of conceptions of democratic socialism, or are we going to follow something quite concrete? And I am, for all of my concern to make this story more culturally pluralistic and deal with race and feminism and the whole range of debates that of issues that come with what's later called identity politics. For all of my concern to bring all of that into play, it's never a discussion that is just ranging to whatever might be called democratic socialism. It's being driven by something, and that is the organizing of people who belonged to the Socialist Labor Party or the Socialist Party or the Farmer Labor parties of another time, and then the various attempts driven by the Socialist Party to try to create some kind of a united front such that you could get all the people who care about these things together. And so it sets up the problem of it's hard to gather all the reform groups if you yourself have an ideology that tends to exclude them by saying that only your ideology is real or is efficacious or will make a difference, and that all these reform causes are just band-aids. If that's the way you self-present, which is so much the issue and the problem in the early Socialist Party, you're going to have a hard time organizing those people because they feel they haven't been taken seriously on their own terms. And in fact, they haven't been. So there's a considerable difference between the Socialist Party of the Debs period, which was the golden age, and then the Socialist Party of the long period of Norman Thomas socialism, where we really are now trying to drive the bus with the socialist ideology that has lost its historic trajectory, its credence. It simply doesn't even have that many people behind it any longer. And now you're dealing with all the tragedies of socialism and communism of the later 20th century. So we've got all that sort of table setting about all of that, what the old guard is in one generation or another to deal with early in the book. And then much of it, much of the heart that's in the middle that has to do with communism and farmer labor parties and all that stuff that Reinhold Niebuhr talked about and so on. We're not going to read any of it, any of that, because we don't have time for it. All I could do this week was to kind of set up a frame, give a sense of the breadth of it, and what will be the distinctive marks of it, define some terms, and then make it clear that where we are going after this week is straight to something that's closer to our world. That is, World War II is just enough of a demarcating line. The world was something before, and then once the world has gone to war yet again, it has such significance and such of a force of driving a trajectory and just changing what the issues are, that it is possible to start up there. Next week, we're going to have some problem with this. The fact that we've just skipped 3 huge chapters certainly will make a difference in how we can jump into the discussion next week. But I think it will work reasonably well. The World War II is such a discrete thing itself, and certain things are coming together, and a certain turn within social democracy that we're already prepared for, because we just saw this in the European story. And then, and once we're past next week, once we've kind of set up that the world that came to be after World War II, then we're ready for that sort of generation of cultural conformity and prosperity that was the 1950s and early 1960s. And that will take us into then what things that are more sort of familiar to us, the social movements of the 1960s, the stagflation of the 1970s, the demoralization, the loss of a life world, what people thought was just normalcy being lost when that post-World War II boom runs out. And then Michael Harrington entering the scene as the founder of 2 social democratic parties, one of which is still very much among us, although it's not so social democratic any longer. And so that will be a setup for what is going to be very familiar, in some ways, very familiar material, figures, arguments, because they're the very things we're talking about all the time anyway at Union, but all of it sort of driven by the history of democratic socialism in this country, moving right up to the present day, because this is a book I'm still writing here. The last few sentences of it anyway will get written in the context in which I'm now placed. So I'm going to take our break here. By now I've learned that these videos have to be just very short, and it's really just a question of sort of making some kind of personal contact. I'm very grateful for our discussion on Moodle this week. We got into some very good sort of table setting topics, and in a couple cases we went into the deep weeds about particular historical movements and backstory movements and the like, all of which I appreciate very much, was grateful for. So I'm going to break off here, friends, and see where I am on the time scale. And please take care. I am mindful of that maybe this is going to be the worst week of all for many of you. But hang in there. We'll get through it. And I look forward to seeing you next week. So long, friends.